Hello chefs. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to sharpen knives. It's by request. It's one of my earliest lessons, which is very important because they are the tools we use all the time. So I'm going to show you a way to do it which is not too difficult, and it is quite reachable and also fairly cheap way of doing it. First of all, we use this knife quite a lot in our demonstrations, which is the chef's knife or cook's knife. And the second one that you probably see me use quite a lot is the palette knife that doesn't need sharpening. It says it is just to be flexible. But you might have seen me use a serrated edge knife for the fruit, and a small paring knife or office knife to prepare the vegetable peeling and cutting, and a peeler. And this is a double bladed peeler with a flat sort of blade that can be sharpened as well, unlike the other ones with a swinging sort of blade. So I'm going to do those, and then we look at perhaps what sort of knife you might be considering to buy if you haven't got those. But those knives is what I use all the time to keep it fairly simple for everybody. The way to sharpen it that you've seen the butcher do it is with steel in hand, which is quite dangerous really, because unless you have a good practice, you might slice your fingers or even hand. And it's something that is mainly for cooks that do it all the time. So I'm going to do it in a way that is easy and perhaps more accessible to you. What I'm going to use is some wet and dry sandpaper, the one used for metal work. I got a coarse one and a fine one, which I already got wet, ready for use. Also, to make it steady, I put a wet piece of kitchen paper onto my chopping board, very close to the edge, so I got free access from the end, from the sides. I'll start off with the big one, which is the one you can see better, and depends on how blunt it is. You might want to use a coarse or even coarser wet and dry paper, which you put straight on the kitchen paper so say doesn't move. And what we're trying to achieve is to have the blade sharp gradually from the very edge, the cutting edge, right down to the side. And maybe I'll do a diagram later to show you what I mean. The thing is to make it fairly flat to the sharpening surface, be a stone, be a steel, or in this case wet and dry. It's nearly flat, and holding firmly, you just do a circular motion on the wet sanding paper. Very gently, doesn't need much weight behind it. And it's a circular motion. And it's nearly flat. It's probably less than 10 degrees incidence to the chopping board. You do one side and then the other. If you're left-handed, this is much easier and more safer too. And to finish off, you lessen the pressure, diminish the pressure, and you just move away from the paper, both ends. And you already can see some of the metal being transferred to the kitchen paper. And when you finish, make sure it's clean. Now that one was a rough one. So if need be, you got a finer one, a finer grade, and you just finish it off on that one. Same story. As close as possible to the edge so you reach the end of the knife. One way and then the other. and this one is nearly as sharp as I want it. So I just go away from the paper with gentle sort of pressure. Great. So I just repeat with a small one. Same story, so keep the edge of your chopping board away so you have the hand just close to the edge and not on top, not to lift the blade. And nearly flat, not flat, otherwise you score the rest of the blade. And you do the same thing as I have done with a big knife. And seeing that my knives are already very sharp, I only do it with a fine grade, which is something that I do, depends on how much I use it myself, once a week. But I would use the steel as a professional. Great. Wash the paper off because it's got clogged up with the metal. Next one is a serrated edge. If you take the serrated edge, one side has got sort of the grinding off to the teeth, and the other side is more flat, which means the teeth go one way. We just use the flat side where the teeth are level with the rest of the blade. Same story, but just one side. Otherwise, eventually you grind off all the teeth and it's no longer a serrated edge. Very gentle, depends very much on how blunt your knives are. You might have to even use a much coarser paper. There's several grades you can buy in the do-it-yourself shops or hardware shops. And that's more than sufficient for me. But if you do it regularly, you don't need to do so much hard work. If you let it go blunt, it's hard work to get it back. This one, let's say the blade is flat, so I put it down flat and keep it flat, more or less the same way as I done the serrated edge, just one way. And the blade will be sharp because you might be able to see it is got both sides on a flat surface, so you can use either right hand or left hand. So that is the sharpening. Make sure they're clean. If you want to progress and spend more money, you can buy a carborundum stone, which again has to use the same way, wet all the time, but it tends to clog up and it doesn't do much good, which is the same thing, and that's superior to the wet and dry because it's got a nice flat and rigid surface. Some of them have two grades, one fine one side and one coarse on the other, but it's the same technique. You might have to concentrate more on the tip sometime if you're using your knife more on the tip. And this will become handy for the next video on Monday, where I prepare pumpkin soup, where the skin of the pumpkin is very hard and you need a sharp knife to do a good job. So that is the sharpening. And just to go into the choice of knife very quickly, I was talking about the blade being gradually honed, ground from the front to the back. And you can see that if you buy the knife, it should be just one even surface, not like this one. This is a household knife. You can see it's got a grinding line. It's done by a machine on both sides, where it's more like a wedge, especially cutting through hard vegetables, which means crack them open rather than slice through them. Basically, if you look at the section of the blade, the one I just shown you, that's the metal, it's got something like this. I'll make it a bit larger, something like this, while those ones, that one is more like this, and that cuts much easier through the food. If you're a sailor, it's just like a difference between a rowing dinghy and a racing yacht, cutting through the water. And if you try to cut through a carrot with both, you very, very quickly feel the difference. It's worth investing in a good knife. They're not very expensive now. They don't have to be the top of the range like the Global, which again are very good. But once they become blunt, unless you apt at sharpening with a diamond steel, you just have a knife which is the same as the others. So that's my lesson. Get them ready for Monday, especially that one, and we do the pumpkin soup. Until then, see you. Bye bye.